The morning sun cast long shadows across the neighborhood as Karen Hendricks marched across the street, clutching a gallon of bleach like a weapon. Her designer heels clicked against the asphalt with military precision, each step fueled by months of simmering rage. She'd warned them about the fountain, the constant gurgling that disrupted her morning yoga, the way it attracted those filthy birds to her pristine lawn. But Marcus Chen had ignored her complaints, dismissed her concerns with that infuriating smile of his. Now, as she unscrewed the cap and poured the chemical cascade into the ornate stone basin, the bleach swirled through the water like liquid vengeance. Dead heron floated to the surface 3 hours later. Karen's act of petty revenge had become something far more sinister, and somewhere in the nearby woods, a hidden camera had captured Marcus Chen Discover Massacre at 7:43 a.m. while refilling his coffee mug at the kitchen window. The morning light caught the surface of his fountain, revealing what looked like a crime scene from a nature documentary. 3 great blue herons lay motionless in the water, their magnificent wings spread like broken umbrellas. That had visited nightly for the past 2 years floated belly up near the fountain's edge, their small paws still reaching toward the surface as if grasping for life itself. "Alina." Marcus's voice cracked as he called to his wife, the coffee mug slipping from his fingers to shatter against the tile floor. Something's wrong with the fountain. At 62, she moved with the grace of someone who'd spent decades dancing professionally. But now her fluid movements were driven by panic. She pressed her face against the window, and her hand flew to her mouth. "Dios mío," she whispered. "What happened to them?" Marcus was already pulling on his jacket, his hands shaking as he fumbled with the zipper. "I don't know, but I'm calling Dr. Martinez right now." She'd wanted something that would bring life to their backyard. Cardinal discovered the flowing water had made every penny worth it. They'd registered it as a certified wildlife habitat through the National Wildlife Federation, complete with native plants, bird feeders, and a small camera system to monitor the animals for a local conservation study. The fountain had become the heart of their retirement, a source of joy that drew them to the window each morning to count their feathered visitors. Now it was a tomb. Dr. Sofia Martinez arrived within 20 minutes, her veterinary emergency kit in one hand and a water testing kit in the other. She'd been working with the Chens for 3 years. Pulling on latex gloves, "The water's been contaminated with something caustic. I can smell it from here." Marcus watched helplessly as Dr. Martinez carefully lifted one of the herons from the water. The bird's magnificent plumage was dulled, its eyes clouded with the unmistakable signs of chemical poisoning. "This is bleach," Dr. Martinez said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Commercial-grade sodium hypo... a thing." "I don't know," Marcus replied. For months, she'd been complaining about the fountain first to them directly, then to the Homeowners Association, and finally to anyone who would listen at the monthly neighborhood meetings. Dr. Martinez was already on her phone, her voice professional but strained. "Yes, this is Dr. Sofia Martinez calling to report a wildlife poisoning incident. I need both fish and wildlife and the EPA here immediately. We're looking at what appears to be deliberate contamination of a registered wildlife habitat." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Federal agencies? This wasn't just about dead animals anymore. This was about federal crimes and environmental violations. The fountain wasn't just a backyard feature. "At least a dozen smaller birds," Marcus replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is going to be classified as an environmental crime," Dr. Martinez said, snapping photos with her phone. "Whoever did this is looking at serious federal charges." On the commotion at the Chen house, Marcus caught her eye and saw something that made his blood run cold. Not surprise or concern, but satisfaction. "She knew Alina," Marcus said quietly. "Go inside and get the camera footage from last night." Alina looked up, her eyes red with tears. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking our security system captured everything," as if sensing the shift. Inattention, Karen's smile faltered. "Excuse me," Dr. Martinez called out, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to dealing with wildlife crimes. Karen's grip tightened on her coffee cup, face, and Marcus saw her hands begin to tremble. "The fountain across the street," Dr. Martinez continued, her eyes never leaving Karen's face. "You have a clear view of it from your porch. You didn't see anyone near it last night or early this morning." Karen's laugh was too high, too forced. "I was asleep. I go to bed early." The woman was a chronic insomniac who spent her nights patrolling her property line with a flashlight, documenting every perceived violation of the neighborhood's landscaping standards. "We'll need to canvass the entire neighborhood," Dr. Martinez said, returning to Marcus and Alina. "Someone saw something. The camera system records everything in 24-hour cycles. If someone was at the fountain last night, we'll have it," slowly showing the peaceful night scene in infrared. For hours, nothing moved except the gentle flow of water and the occasional rustle of leaves. Then, at 5:47 a.m., a figure appeared on screen. Alina gasped. The infrared clearly showed a woman, in a robe and slippers, carrying what appeared to be a large container. She moved with purpose, unscrewing something and pouring it directly into the fountain. The timestamp showed she spent less than 3 minutes at the fountain before disappearing off camera. "Can you enhance the image?" Dr. Martinez asked. Marcus zoomed in on the figure's face. The infrared wasn't perfect, but the woman's profile was unmistakable: the sharp nose, the distinctive way she carried herself, the robe that matched the one he'd seen Karen wearing countless times during her midnight property inspections. "That's her," Alina whispered. "That's Karen Hendricks." Dr. Martinez was already back on her phone. "I need to speak with the investigating officer immediately. We have video evidence of the suspect." Marcus felt a cold satisfaction settling in his chest. Karen had finally crossed a line she couldn't uncross. Shut. Within an hour, Marcus's backyard had transformed into a crime scene. Federal agents from Fish and Wildlife wore hazmat suits as they collected samples and documented the carnage, captured every angle of the contaminated water. Agent Rebecca Torres, a stern woman in her 40s with prematurely gray hair, interviewed Marcus and Alina in their living room while the evidence collection continued outside. "The footage is clear," Agent Torres said, reviewing the video on Marcus's laptop. "But I need to understand the history between you and your neighbor. This level of retaliation suggests an ongoing conflict." Marcus chose his words carefully. "Karen's been complaining about the fountain for months. She claims it's too loud, that it attracts pests. She's filed complaints with the HOA demanded. We remove it, and you refused. The fountain is part of a federal WI. Karen Hendricks had never run so hard in her life. Behind her, the sound of barking. Dogs grew closer with each labored breath. She'd watched from her bedroom window. As Marcus discovered the carnage, savoring his shock and Elena's tears, finally, the Chens understood what it felt like to have their peace destroyed. But federal agents, environmental crimes, the words hammered through her mind as she stumbled over a fallen log, her manicured hands scraping against bark as she caught herself. This was supposed to be about noise, complaints, and property values, not dead animals and hazmat suits. Her phone buzzed incessantly in her robe pocket. Her lawyer, her sister, reporters who'd somehow gotten her number. She'd turned it off after the 5th call from Channel 7 News, asking for comment on the wildlife massacre in Millbrook Estates. She'd hiked these trails before. Back when she'd first moved to the neighborhood and still cared about fitness, the mainspring was maybe 2 miles ahead. She could hide there until the search died down, then figure out how to get out of this mess. Making this worse for yourself, Karen pressed herself against a massive oak tree, chest heaving. FBI. When had the FBI gotten involved? She'd poured bleach into a fountain, not robbed a bank. Her phone vibrated again. Against her better judgment, she checked the screen. 17 missed calls, 43 text messages, and a news alert that made her blood freeze. Breaking federal environmental crime investigation expands as contamination threatens 3-county water supply. 3 counties. Karen's legs gave out, and she slid down the tree trunk to sit in the mud. The bleach was supposed to kill the fountain, not poison an entire region. She'd seen the Chun's elaborate setup, all those cameras and monitoring equipment, but she'd assumed it was just Marcus being his usual obsessive self. A stick cracked behind her, and she spun around to see a German shepherd emerge from the underbrush, its handler close behind. The dog's ears were up, nose work in the air, and when it caught her scent, it barked once and sat down. "Good boy." "Rex," the handler said, speaking into his radio. "We have her, 200 yards southwest of the old oak grove." Karen stood slowly, her hands visible and empty. "I want to call my lawyer." "Ma'am, you can make that call once we get you back." "To civilization," the handler replied. "Right now, we need to get you out of these woods safely." More agents appeared through the trees, 4 of them, including Agent Torres. Karen noticed they all wore protective gear and carried equipment she didn't recognize. "Mrs. Hendricks," Agent Torres said, approaching carefully, "I'm Agent Torres, FBI Environmental Crime Unit. You're under arrest for violations of the Clean Water Act, the Endangered Species Act, and the Federal Wildlife Protection Act." Above a whisper, the noise. Agent Torres pulled out a digital recorder. "You're referring to the fountain on the Chen property." Karen nodded, suddenly feeling very small in her muddy robe. It ran 24 hours a day. "I couldn't sleep, couldn't concentrate. I asked them nicely to turn it off, but they refused. So you decided to pour bleach into it." "I just wanted to break the pump." "Mrs. Hendricks, you attended the Homeowners Association meeting where Dr. Martinez presented her research on the wildlife habitat." "I didn't think you." "Didn't think what?" "That actions have consequences." The question hung in the air as the agents began walking Karen back toward the trail. She could hear helicopters overhead now, their rotors beating against the morning sky. "How many people are looking for me?" she asked. 47 agents, 3 K9 units, and a hazmat team. Agent Torres replied. "Mrs. Hendricks, do you understand what you've done?" Karen stumbled, and an agent caught her elbow. "I killed some birds. I'll pay a fine." "Do community service. You killed 23 protected animals and contaminated a water source that feeds into the regional aquifer system. As of this morning, 3 counties are under a water quality advisory. 2 elementary schools have been evacuated as a precaution. The bleach you poured into that fountain has been traced through the underground spring system. It's moving toward the main water treatment facility for the Eastern District. If it reaches the intake pipes, we're looking at a public health emergency, affecting over 200,000 people." The words hit Karen like physical blows. 200,000 people. "I didn't know," she whispered. "Your neighbor's fountain was connected to one of the most sensitive ecosystems in the state," Agent Torres continued. "The spring system you're about to contaminate supports endangered species, provides drinking water to 3 counties, and feeds into a wetlands preserve that's been protected since 1987. They emerged from the trees to find a staging area that looked like a disaster response operation. Emergency vehicles lined the access road, hazmat teams were suiting up, and a mobile command center had been established in the preserve parking lot." Shouted her name, and she instinctively raised her hands to cover her face. Karen Hendricks, Channel 7 News. "Do you have any comment on the environmental disaster you've caused?" "Environmental disaster." The words followed her to the command vehicle, where Agent Torres sat her down across from a stern-looking woman in a hazmat suit. "This is Dr. Patricia Wells from the EPA Emergency Response Team," Agent Torres said. "She needs to ask you some questions about the contamination." Dr. Wells opened a thick folder. "Mrs. Hendricks, we need to know exactly what you poured into the fountain. Brand, name, concentration, volume, everything." Karen's hands shook as she tried to remember. It was just bleach. Regular household bleach. "What brand?" I don't remember. Something from Costco, the big jug." Dr. Wells made notes. "Approximately how much?" "The whole thing may be a gallon." "Jesus Christ," Dr. Wells muttered, then looked up sharply. "Mrs. Hendricks, a gallon of commercial bleach in a closed water system is enough to create a toxic plume. If that reaches the water treatment facility, we're looking at a chemical emergency that could affect drinking water for the entire eastern region." Karen felt the world spinning around her. "What can I do? How do I fix this?" "You can't," Dr. Wells said bluntly. "The contamination is already in the spring system. Stop it before it reaches the main aquifer. We'll have to shut down water service to 3 counties while we flush the entire system." Agent Torres's radio crackled. The response: "Mrs. Hendricks, you're looking at federal charges that could put you in prison for decades. I suggest you start thinking about how you're going to pay for the cleanup." "How much?" Karen asked weakly. "Conservative estimate, $15 million. That's just for the environmental remediation. It doesn't include the economic impact of shutting down water service, the cost of evacuating schools, or the lawsuits. From affected residents, $15 million. Karen's house was worth maybe $800,000. Writes again. "You have the right to remain silent. I want to help," Karen interrupted. "Tell me what I can do to fix this. You can start by telling us if you used anything else." drain cleaner, fertilizer, anything that might have been mixed with the bleach. Karen thought back to that morning, trying to remember her mindset. She'd been so focused on the fountain, so determined to finally take action. No, just the bleach. I poured it straight from the jug. Dr. Wells returned, her expression grim. The contamination has reached the secondary springs. We're implementing emergency protocols. Through the command vehicle's window, Karen watched as more emergency vehicles arrived, fire trucks, ambulances, and what looked like a mobile laboratory. The preserved parking lot had become a disaster response center, all because she'd wanted to silence a fountain. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister. "Karen, what the hell have you done? It's on CNN. CNN." Karen closed her eyes, imagining her face on national television, her name associated with environmental disaster and federal crimes. Agent Torres was on her radio again. Priority message for all units. We have confirmation that the contamination is moving faster than pred. The Millbrook Estates Community Center had been transformed into a disaster coordination headquarters. What had once hosted bingo nights and book clubs now buzzed with federal agents, environmental scientists, and emergency response teams. Karen sat in a plastic chair in the center's main room, handcuffed to a table, while her lawyer, Richard Castellanos. 37 separate violations, Richard muttered, flipping through pages. "Karen, do you understand what you're facing here?" Karen watched through the window as hazmat teams loaded equipment onto trucks. The parking lot that had once been filled with minivans dropping off kids for summer camp was now a staging area for one of the largest environmental response operations in state history. "I understand I'm screwed," Karen replied flatly. "The EPA is treating this as an act of environmental terrorism. The FBI has classified it as a federal hate crime because you targeted a protected wildlife sanctuary, and now, with the water emergency, they're adding public endangerment charges." The words felt surreal, like something from a movie about eco-warriors and corporate conspiracies. Not something that happened because a suburban housewife got tired of hearing water trickle. Agent Torres approached their table, carrying a tablet and wearing an expression that had grown progressively grimmer throughout the day. "Mrs. Hendricks, we need to discuss your statement to the press." Karen looked up, confused. "I haven't talked to any press. Not directly, but your neighbor across the street, Mrs. Peterson, recorded your conversation with her yesterday afternoon. She's provided it to Channel 7 News." Richard grabbed Karen's arm. "What conversation?" Karen felt ice form in her stomach. Yesterday afternoon, she'd been riding high on anticipation, finally ready to take action against the fountain. She'd run into Mrs. Peterson while getting her mail and ... "Oh God," Karen whispered. Agent Torres tapped her tablet, and Karen's voice filled the room. "I'm done playing nice with the Chens. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to put an end to that fountain once and for all. They want to ignore my complaints. Fine, I'll handle it myself." The recording continued with Mrs. Peterson asking what Karen meant, and Karen's response made her blood run cold. "Let's just say, when I'm done, that fountain won't be attracting any more of those filthy birds to my lawn." Richard dropped his head into his hands. "Jesus, Karen, you planned this. You announced your intention to harm wildlife." "I didn't mean it like that," Karen protested. "I just wanted to break the pump." Agent Torres stopped the recording. "Mrs. Hendricks, this establishes premeditation. You planned to damage the fountain and specifically mentioned the wildlife you wanted to eliminate." Through the community center's windows, Karen could see news crews setting up for what looked like a major press conference. The governors about to address the state, Agent Torres continued. 3 counties are now under mandatory water restrictions, and we're trucking in emergency supplies to hospitals and nursing homes. Karen's phone, which had been confiscated and returned for her lawyer's use, buzzed with a text from her sister. "Karen, you need to see the news. They're calling you the fountain poisoner. There are protesters outside your house." "Protesters?" Karen closed her eyes, imagining angry crowds on her perfectly manicured lawn, probably trampling her prize-winning roses. "How bad is it getting?" she asked. Agent Torres consulted her tablet. "We've had to evacuate 2 elementary schools, 3 nursing homes, and a pediatric hospital. The National Guard is distributing bottled water to 47,000 households. The economic impact is estimated at over $200 million so far." $200 million. Karen felt the room spin around her. Her act of petty revenge had become a regional catastrophe, affecting hundreds of thousands of people. "And that's just day one," Agent Torres continued. "If we can't neutralize the contamination before it reaches the main aquifer, we're looking at a water crisis that could last months." Richard was frantically taking notes. "What about a plea agreement?" "My client is willing to cooperate fully, Mr. Castellanos. The Justice Department isn't interested in deals right now. They want to make an example." Karen looked out at the press conference setup. "This story is going national. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, they're all sending crews. Your actions have become a symbol of environmental recklessness." Karen's phone rang. Richard answered, listened for a moment, then hung up with a grave expression. "That was my partner. Karen, you need to prepare yourself. The story has gone viral on social media. #fountain poisoner is trending nationwide. Someone created a TikTok using your HOA meeting footage, and it's been viewed 12 million times. 12 million times. Karen thought about the HOA meeting, where she'd argued with Dr. Martinez about the fountain. Someone had recorded it, and now millions of people were watching her petty complaints escalate into environmental catastrophe. "I want to see it," Karen said quietly. Richard reluctantly opened the video on his phone. The TikTok was a split screen, showing Karen's angry face during the HOA meeting overlaid with footage of the dead animals in the fountain. A caption read, "This is what happens when Karens attack nature." The comment section was brutal. "Turn it off," Karen said, but she'd already seen enough. Hundreds of thousands of comments calling her a monster. Sharing her address and personal information, Agent Torres received a radio call and stepped away. When she returned, her expression was even more serious. "Mrs. Hendricks, I need to inform you that the contamination has reached the backup wells for County Medical Center. They're evacuating the ICU and NICU as a precaution." Karen felt something break inside her chest. The baby unit. 43 premature infants are being transferred to hospitals in other counties. The logistics are ... complex. Richard grabbed Karen's arm. "Karen, we need to discuss a public apology. Something that shows remorse and remorse," Karen snapped. "You think I'm not feeling remorse? I think you're feeling sorry for yourself," Agent Torres interjected. "Mrs. Hendricks, those babies are being moved because you decided your sleep was more important than federal law. Emergency responders are risking their lives to contain your mess. Families are being evacuated from their homes. Where was your remorse when you were pouring bleach into a protected wildlife sanctuary?" Karen looked around the community center that had become disaster headquarters. Every person in the room was dealing with the consequences of her actions. Agents, environmental scientists, emergency coordinators, National Guard personnel, dozens of people working around the clock because she'd wanted to silence a fountain. "I didn't think," she said quietly. "No, you didn't," Agent Torres agreed. "You didn't think about the animals, the environment, the water supply, or the hundreds of thousands of people who would be affected by your actions. You thought about yourself." Dr. Wells entered the community center, still in partial hazmat gear, her face grim. Dr. Wells turned the tablet so Karen could see a map with red areas spreading like a cancer through the underground water system. "This is the contamination plume from your gallon of bleach. It's now affecting 17 miles of underground springs and threatens to reach the main aquifer by tomorrow morning." Karen stared at the map. The red areas looked like blood spreading through the veins of the earth, and she was the source. "The neutralization efforts are only partially successful," Dr. Wells continued. "We're injecting chemical at 12 different points, but the contamination is moving faster than we anticipated. Mrs. Hendricks, your actions may have permanently damaged one of the most important freshwater systems in the state." "Permanently," Karen whispered. "The ecosystem that supported the wildlife you killed took decades to develop. The spring system has been flowing for thousands of years. Recovery, if it's possible at all, will take generations." Karen's phone buzzed. With a call from her mortgage company, Richard answered and spoke in hushed tones, then hung up with a stricken expression. "They're classifying it as an intentional criminal act." Agent Torres's radio crackled. "Command, this is the governor's office. We need an immediate update on the contamination timeline. The president has been briefed." The president, Karen felt the weight of federal attention settling on her shoulders. Her neighborhood dispute had escalated to the highest levels of government. "Mrs. Hendricks," Dr. Wells said, I need you to understand the full scope of what